So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So we continue with this part two that we were dealing with the authorship of Matthew, and we continue with this with the deliberation. So we ended up talking about some evidences, internal, external, talking about patristic citation. We spoke about the manuscript evidence and all that, still contending with the whole notion of if, the authorship of Matthew. And as I told you, there are many people who struggle with the idea, they think it is anonymous, and I did say that it will be unlikely, a lot unlikely, that when if a person attaches their name to a piece of material, to a piece of document, it is not they don't have some level of authorship or on the matter or on the article or whatever they are writing. So we continue, and we're going to be dealing with today. This is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to look at the purpose of the Gospel of Matthew, the main point in the Gospel of Matthew, and the difference of the Gospel of Matthew between all of them. So we're going to be closing off.
Make me a reflection of your image. Let me be an agent of your peace. Make me a bearer of your message. Let the mind of Christ be in.
So what is the purpose of the book of Matthew? The purpose of the book of Matthew is to tell how Israel's Messiah, Jesus, comes to his people, the Jews, but is rejected by them, and how after his resurrection, he sends the disciples to the Gentiles instead. So Jesus originally came to the Jews, but it doesn't mean when it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life, John 3:16. It doesn't mean that God didn't come to the world, even though he came to Israel. Is that he's continuing his covenant with Israel, and using Israel as a platform to preach to the world. From the beginning, from the creation, God was using the children of Israel as the standard for everybody to see and for everybody to come to know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so Jesus comes to his people, but his people rejected him because, as I told you, if you read the book of Matthew, Jesus was born in a manger. And they were looking for somebody to come to conquer the Roman Empire physically, but he came in a different way. He was still a king, but he wasn't the king they thought he would be, quote unquote. So they rejected him, and so he sends his disciples. When he, in Acts chapter 2, he says, when the Holy Spirit come upon you, Acts chapter 1 verse 8, and you shall be witnesses in Judea, in Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the world. So he sends his disciples to evangelize the world, to tell the world about the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so Matthew wishes to emphasize that the Jewish tradition should not be lost in a church that is increasingly becoming Gentile. That's the purpose of the book. The Jewish tradition is not lost in the whole scheme of the church that the Gentile was filling up the church more than the Jewish people. And not only that this is the purpose, but what is the main point of the book of Matthew? The Gospel of Matthew proclaims the good news, the evangelion, the good news, the speak, that's where we get eulogy from, to speak well of the good news that God is Emmanuel. God with us. And in Matthew chapter 1 verse 23 it says, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And this is a prophecy, or one of the prophecies of the Old Testament, and we could link this to Isaiah 7:14, which said, therefore The Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. You know, this Jesus is God's Messiah, whose teaching, healing, suffering, death, and resurrection now constitute a new disciple. Matthew wanted to show how Jesus is the continuation of and fulfillment of the whole biblical story of God and Israel. So he emphasized that Jesus is the Messiah from the lineage of David. Jesus is a new authoritative teacher like Moses, and we see this prophesied in Deuteronomy 18, when God says, I'm going to send another prophet from amongst you who will be in and you must listen to him, which means he will be greater than Moses. Jesus is the God with us, or in Hebrew, Emmanuel. And then we come to its difference from the other gospel. The difference between Matthew and the other gospels is that Matthew is the most Jewish of all the gospels. It is focused and entrenched in Jewish life and Jewish literature and Jewish understanding. It seeks to tell the story of Jesus to a distinctively, I keep repeating this, distinctively Jewish audience. Matthew's purpose in writing the gospel is to convince devout and dedicated first century Palestinian Jews that Jesus, who they rejected, is the promised Messiah of God.